meeting this evening. We will take care of minutes from our November 21st meeting. Those minutes have been circulated in advance, and I ask for a motion from commission members for action on those minutes. So moved. Discussion? In favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Our minutes from our last meeting are approved. This takes us now to the public hearing section of our, is our system working?
Oh, yes, now much better. Whatever you did, you fixed it.
Maybe this is the year we get a new sound system, behave ourselves. Anyways, as each application is announced by a member of the staff, we ask that the applicant or their representative come to the podium in the front of the room, provide your name and address for the record, and then a brief overview of your application. Following any questions from the commission members, we will then provide an opportunity for members of the public who wish to speak in favor of the application to do that, and likewise an opportunity for members of the public who wish to speak in opposition to the application to do that as well. Where comments are made in opposition, we will encourage the applicant to return to address the comments made in opposition.
The comments are 2 minutes for the comments.
Yes, thank you. And in recent months, we have instituted a 2-minute limit on comments, either pro or con. So it truly isn't necessary to repeat the same substantive comments from a previous speaker. If you want to introduce new topics, that might be a better use of your 2 minutes, but we also have a timekeeper to monitor our time so we can move kind of expeditiously through these public hearings. Thank you for that reminder. And with that, I think we are ready for our first public hearing this evening.
Good evening, Commission members. The first public hearing tonight is SP 2214, a special permit for a restaurant in order to establish a coffee shop on properties situated at 1224, 1226, and 1228 East Fayette Street. 105 Mertz Avenue LLC is the property owner, and Paul Belinsky is the applicant, and the properties lie within a business Class A zoning district. This public hearing is a continuation from November 21st. And just as a reminder to the commission did approve a filing extension for a companion re-subdivision to combine the 3 properties into 1 new lot. The proposal does necessitate 4 waivers from the zoning regulations with respect to the parking, arterial lot width, arterial lot size, and street line treatment requirements. And the Planning Commission did approve a substantially similar application for a special permit in 2019. This special permit was never acted upon, rendering it null and void, thus the current application. During the public hearing on November 21st, the Commission agreed to continue the public hearing in order to allow staff an opportunity to review plans that were submitted at that meeting. Those plans, that site plan was referred to the transportation planner, who noted that the revised site plan did not incorporate required revisions noted in 2019. These comments were provided to the applicant on December 7th.
So, Paul Belinsky, and address is 1226 East Fayette Street, Syracuse 13210. The first issue was proposed, the proposal continues to deviate from the city of Syracuse zoning rules and regulations as respects the parking, arterial width, and arterial size, a street line treatment regulation as follows. So, we're obviously not changing the size of the lot, and so we're requesting to have a waiver on that rule there. The next one down in the same note was saying that there's 3 off-street parking spaces that we're proposing to keep for that building, and then it's brought out that that we need to have 2 parking spaces for the driveway next door. This had me a little bit confused because there is there's room for 3 cars stacked inward in that driveway. I'm not sure if he's trying to say that we have to have 2 cars wide for the driveway, if that's a regulation, but there is room and I can show you in here. There's it's right here. There's stacked deep in this. So, if that's okay, then we could leave that alone. If that is still an issue, then we would ask for a waiver on that. The next part down was talking about street frontage, and let me see. So deviates from Part C. Okay, the City of Syracuse zoning rules and regulations amended the proposed restaurant shall comply with the provision of Part C, Section 1, Article 5, the City of Syracuse zoning regulations amended wherein the pursuant paragraph 2, a minimum of 8 feet in width measured inward from the street line for the entire length of the sidewalk excluding the, so here we have the way that it was drawn up. The truck, you end up having a few inches go past the line here that is proposed. So we're off by a few inches apparently. It's very minimal. So. And so, I mean, it's very minimal what's left over there, but, okay, now we're talking about also there's a requirement of a 10,000 square foot in the, total in the lot size when there's actually 9,900 square feet, so we're slightly short of that, 100 square feet short. The minimum of 150 feet frontage along the front of the property, and we only have 99 feet along the front, so we're a little bit short of that. There's not really anything that we could do to change that, so we need to ask for a waiver on the size of the lot, and hopefully that would allow to be passed as well.
Let's go back to the parking. I think the issue from the transportation planner's perspective was not that you couldn't fit 3 cars in there, but in putting 3 cars in there, they would encroach into the right-of-way, and also you'd have to back out into the street. That would be a safety concern.
Currently, that's what we have there. We were hoping to keep what we have, but if that's too large of an issue, we can let that go. The street's not, it hasn't been that much of an issue. Normally, I back into the driveway off the street, I back in and then pull straight out.
Right, and that's you, but a customer may not be quite so careful if they're rushing in to get a good cup of coffee there. So I think that was the basis for the transportation planner's comment on that. Are there other questions from the commission members on this application?
Prior to any further questions, I would just like to point out that it appears I do not have that version of the site plan. That does not appear to be referred out to the transportation planner.
Those are actually just stickers that I placed on there to illustrate that there is extra parking in the driveway that was referred to. That's not permanent. He has the same plan, but there are, in the driveway for the house next door, the architect didn't draw in parking for the next door house. And so because this was brought up in this, as an issue here, I just was illustrating that there is more than 2 car parking in that driveway next door, so that shouldn't be an issue. That is not permanent. It's only a sticker on this proposal.
So there is only one version of the site plan, and we have.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
I will point out to the planning commission then that the transportation planner's comments stand as submitted.
And the applicant has been provided those.
Yes, those were sent to the applicant on December 7th.
So, back in June of 2019, the Planning Commission approved the site plan, which the transportation planner had also seen and commented on. And his comments to us today basically are saying that what your new drawing doesn't incorporate the things you changed the last time in order for us to approve the site plan. So the previous plan was actually approved, and he had some issues with this one. And specifically, he notes that even though you have currently there's parking in front of the smaller building, that's not allowed. You can't park in the front setback. So back in 2019, you took those spaces out and showed tables there instead. So he's making a note that the previous plan is more appropriate in that regard. He also talks about the curb cut for the driveway needing to be 12 feet wide, and again, the current drawing shows it much wider because it shows that big drop curb for the pull-in spaces. So that's something else we would be looking to see changed. He also talks about the need for sidewalks that aren't shown on the drawing, and requiring a bike rack. So it would seem that from the transportation planner's perspective, your previous site plan with some small changes, like adding the sidewalk, that's more appropriate than what you've just provided us. So if we were to go forward in a positive way, it would seem that going back to this drawing gets you closer to approval than the drawing that you just submitted.
There's one other difference that
Okay.
So in this plan here, there's less occupancy in the building than in that plan.
Okay.
So that made a difference on how much parking was required as well. So with this plan, the whole back section was basically just to the bathrooms, and that was it. With the previous plan, the back section was used for occupancy and for customers. So that might make a slight difference on.
But I would assume that makes a difference in the total number of spaces that you need, but given the size of the lot, you still need a waiver for all of those anyway.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Given the land uses and the customer area for the restaurant slash coffee shop, that drives the parking requirement, whatever it is. How you meet that requirement is up to you within the parameters of city review, particularly DPW, in conjunction with approval from the Planning Commission. If you can provide the required parking legally, that's great. If you can't, which according to the transportation planner, it appears it's not that the parking is not allowed in the front yard because it's business class A, but the parking you have, the legal parking size encroaches into the city right of way, which DPW is not willing to sign off on. So you have to revise that, and whatever parking you're short is what you can request the Planning Commission a waiver of, and they have the authority to grant that waiver. But the parking requirement stands as it is based on land uses.
And Jeff, is that number different from the number? There's a change to the interior organization, so it may or may not have changed by a space or two.
Yes, I don't remember what the required parking for the 2019 application was.
But the bottom line, given the constraints of the lots, it's not going to be accommodated and a waiver is needed. And it was previously in 2019 as well.
In 2019, it was all street parking. There was no parking at all for the business.
Right, so we must have waived that.
Yeah, all
So
of it, yeah.
we would just be repeating that. If we set the commercial use aside, And the 2 spaces for the residential, this is the house, not the smaller
Yes,
building.
and for the record, the planning commission does not have the authority to waive the residential parking.
But from a functional perspective, stacking those 2 spaces in the driveway, is that considered an acceptable way to provide those spaces, or do they have to be, or do you have to be able to maneuver in them independently?
I will leave that determination to the planning commission. Technically, they are supposed to be workable parking spaces, 8.5 by 18 feet, that's by regulation. If there's an access aisle, by regulation, it should be 11 feet, but that can be waived. If they're parallel parking spaces, I'll leave that up to you to determine
Okay.
if it's workable or not. If it's stacked parking, I will leave that up to you to determine whether there's sufficient help on hand to relocate cars.
Thank you.
Other questions from the commission members? Thank you very much. Are there individuals who would like to speak in favor of this application? If so, please come forward, provide your name, address, and your comments. Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition to the application? If so, please come to the podium, provide your name and address and your comments. So we have no additional speakers. We've had our presentation. Are there any outstanding informational needs that the commission might have, or are we in a position to close the public hearing? Okay, then we'll declare this hearing closed, and we'll pause for a moment to see if there's a motion for action on SP 22-14, special permit for the restaurant on East Fayette Street.
I would move approval for the negative declaration, granting the waivers that are requested, but on the condition that all of the transportation planner's comments are incorporated into a revised site plan.
Discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? SP-2214, special permit for the restaurant is approved. Thank you very much. Thanks for your patience. Our next, public hearing, please.
Before the next public hearing, if you permit me to take an administrative timeout.
Absolutely. And
I don't
speak,
know if
speak
it's-
to that microphone very sternly.
I don't know if it's the. The next public hearing is PR 2219, a project site review for new construction to construct a 6-story apartment building with accessory parking on properties situated at 1001 to 1019 and 1027 to 1029 East Genesee Street, 301 to 307, 309, and 313 to 323 South Crouse Avenue, 1014 to 1016 East Fayette Street, and 201 South Crouse Avenue and 208 University Avenue. Bucky Enterprises LLC, 1027 East Genesee Street LLC, South Crouse Commons, Charleston Lamont Collins, Eric Evett Collins, 1014, 1016 Fayette Street Parking LLC, and 700 Out Parcel LLC and Genesee Armory LLC are the owners. Timberwolf Capital Properties LLC is the applicant, and the properties lie within a business Class A zoning district. At the last public hearing, on November 21st, I don't have my notes in front of me. You did receive updated plans, which were referred out and then ultimately modified so that the property at, I believe it was 1010 East Washington Street with the historical building has been removed from the off-street parking plan.
Thank you. I'll explain that in just one second. Brian Bouchard with CHA, project engineer working on behalf of the applicant. Just to take a little bit of a step back from that, you'll recall that our initial presentation included a residential apartment project where we had 315 units and 130 parking spaces. So that initial project that we presented to the commission required a waiver of 185 spaces. After discussion and comments, at the last meeting, we presented those changes to the project, which also included commercial space along Genesee Street, and a increase in parking count, which was increasing on-site parking and also acquiring a separate parcel off-site for parking, along with a 40-space lease that is off-site with Copper Beach. So that revised project came to you at the last meeting as 282 units with 282 parking spaces. We left that meeting essentially with the commission's request for staff to look closely at the zoning nuances related to a parking lot, things like the side yard screening and street line treatment areas, and then also more specifically to have a look at this parking in terms of how its relationship to that historic house were going to be interpreted. So a few things have transpired, and I'll start with the Board of Zoning Appeals last Thursday. Our entire building is compliant with the building setbacks, except for the small portion on the corner where our entrance canopy projects into that front yard, and the BZA did grant that variance at their meeting on Thursday. We also had talk to it a little bit easier. We also had comments from the city transportation planner. Nothing that drastically changed any type of the scope or any major project components. The majority of it dealt with the right-of-way in terms of dimensioning the on-street parking and the loading areas. We also increased the sidewalk width to be 10 feet at his request. And we've added the parking pay stations that would be available for the public for that on-street parking. We've delineated where our bicycle parking would be, both interior and exterior to the buildings, and shown where the various landscape areas would be within the city right-of-way, including restoring some of what is hardscape stone mulch back to topsoil and seed with landscaping. We also visited the Syracuse Landmark Preservation Board. This was in relation to our off-site parking proposal that we discussed. So the off-site parking lot currently exists as two parcels. There's 201 South Krause, which is the vacant piece in the front along Krause, and then there's 1010 East Washington, which is the historic home in its individual parcel. We presented this plan to them in a revised fashion with more parking. We had 67 spaces before. We talked about the benefits of this in terms of that house currently being vacant and that lot being vacant. This is going to provide driveway access to that parcel currently because there is no access to it currently. So there's a lot of positive aspects to provide parking here for our project, obviously, in terms of the apartments, but it also creates a driveway that can be used for future access to that house. What part of the concern was, which is something that actually the Planning Commission mentioned before we even got there, was to make sure that this historic house has enough breathing room for its future use. Essentially, we had kind of encapsulated it with our parking for a necessity, but we talked a lot about how that would impact the ability to lease this in the future and convert it essentially to some type of retail use or commercial use or a law office or something like that. So what we've done is left enough space by taking our improvements off of that parcel. There's enough space that you can see on the plan to create a row of parking specific to whatever that use may be. There would also be a need for things like sidewalk and handicap access, so ramps to get in and out of that structure, and then landscaping. And essentially what we've done here is remove 24 spaces from our original proposal that we talked about last time. So we're providing 43 spaces on this lot for the apartments with the intent that this could be expanded off of specific to whatever use may go there, so that there's enough parking, sidewalks, and landscaping for that historic house. So essentially the loss, is 24 spaces, so we're providing 43. So our request for this commission, based on respecting sort of the space around that house, is for a 24 space waiver associated with those apartments. Again, 258 spaces is what we're left with in total for 282 units. And to justify that, we talked about some of the parking counts that we were comparing ourselves to originally. Theory Syracuse parks 40% of their beds. Laurel on Wellington parks 40% of their beds. And with this even adjusted parking, we're still providing more parking than 70% of our bedrooms. So it's a significant improvement from some of those other projects, and obviously a significantly reduced ask in terms of our original request for the 185 space waiver.
Excuse me, Brian, just as a reminder, there are 10 spaces required for the retail commercial space.
Correct. So this is dealing just with what we were providing for the apartments. We mentioned last time that by adding that commercial space along Genesee Street, that there's really on-street parking that would be utilized for that. We're also adding 15 spaces of on-street parking. All of this is public parking, so we can't credit it to the project for that commercial use, but that does have 10 spaces required for it that we'd be asking for as well. And I'll pause there.
So the total number of spaces requested in the waiver is, what's the number?
24 for the apartments and 10 for the commercial use on Genesee Street. So it'll be 34 total.
34 combined.
Yep.
Okay.
Does the site plan for the satellite parking respond to the transportation planner's comments regarding its details?
Correct. So we had went through a lot of comments, both for the project, but also there were a few specific to this, including the street line treatment area, which was landscaping and buffering. And then also we did move the handicap spaces from what were existing in the center stall. And his concern was that with a handicap space, you have the accessible aisle, and that he wanted a separated sidewalk to get from that accessible aisle to the public way. So you can see we moved those 2 required handicap spaces and provided a sidewalk out to the public sidewalk there.
What about the islands for other areas for trees?
So the original plan had not as much side yard and rear yard treatment areas for landscaping. By the reconfiguring that we did and taking away some of what was shown kind of around the building proper, we were able to comply fully with the side yard and rear yard treatment areas. So there is plenty of room for landscaping, but obviously having landscape internal to just those center rows would, if you add a landscape island, is gonna lose a space. So we chose to put that landscaping outboard of that.
Well, he talks about perimeter screening, but that's separate from the island. So you've done perimeter landscape treatment, but not the island.
Correct.
That he asked for. Okay.
Right. Yep. Obviously, there's a balance there. I think we'd be willing to, if the planning commission desired it, we could take 2 spaces out and create those landscape islands. But I think with the row that we have, usually you would plan on, if you have a row of 40 spaces, every 12th space or something, sometimes municipalities have a rule for when that tree planting island kind of takes out a parking space. I'm not sure with the rows that we have if there would be benefit to taking 2 more spaces out and having the 26 spaces be a waiver. And I think
Did he specifically ask for one island that would be the equivalent of 2 spaces? Do we know what he specifically was asking for?
no, not necessarily.
Jeff, do you happen to know? It doesn't say in his notes. Okay. So if he was looking at, I'm not really sure where he suggests they go. So I'm not sure if he's looking at that center bank, and he wanted it down the middle, or if he wanted them just at the end.
Sure.
Because obviously, if he was talking about the double stacked island, a double stack, yeah, if you put an island there, you lose all of your parking. If he was just talking about it if he was just talking about the end, losing 2 spaces might be what addresses concern, so we just don't know that, okay.
Questions, comments? Okay. Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Are there individuals who wish to speak in favor of this application? If so, please come forward to do so. Is there anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to the application? So, podium, provide your name, address, comments. See no further speakers for this application. Are there any outstanding information needs from the commission?
I have a procedural question. So it says in our staff report that the Landmark Preservation Board is going to see this Thursday, so they haven't commented on this yet?
They have received it. The comments I handed out this evening should have their
Oh,
comments. On the second to last page, with an update of December 1st.
so it says the development team is preparing a C of A application for the December 15th meeting that will address the design of the surface parking lot in relation to the historic house and its site, including screening and fencing. So they've not commented on this revised site plan for the satellite parking.
I thought they did.
So, just a comment, when we presented to them, we were told that it required a certificate of appropriateness because of the construction on 1010 East Washington. That piece is specific to the house, obviously. And I believe that by taking the parking off of that parcel, that we're no longer obligated to get a certificate of appropriateness because there is no improvements on the house parcel. But I also believe that Kate has asked potentially to look at things like what the stockade fence material would be, and whether that's still an obligation for us to do. I think we'd be happy to do it, but I'm not sure it's required.
Well, I'm going to defer to Kate Atwater, who happens to be
She happens to
here.
be in the room.
Just happens to be there. Excellent.
Let's take advantage of that. Just
the
give your
whistle.
name,
Yeah, sure.
so forth.
Kate Atwater, I'm the preservation planner for the city and staff to the Landmark Preservation Board. So our, or rather the LPB's comments were, when the board reviewed the plans that still had incorporated 1010 East Washington into the site plan, so that yes, and it would have required a certificate of appropriateness. Or rather the LPB may or may not, depending on the outcome this evening, there may be additional review of the, because it is adjacent to the local protected site, that the one vacant parcel that will be used for, is proposed for use for parking. It would need to come as a referral from zoning, but there may be an opportunity for the Landmark Preservation Board to review the fencing, screening, whatever is proposed for the parking lot, because of its close proximity to certificate of appropriateness. And I don't know if that would come as a project site review. I would leave that up to staff. Sorry.
I don't know where
It's, but, yeah, anyway.
So, be some guidance from the law department here. Are we, based on that information and what the Preservation Board may yet act upon relative to this project, are we well advised to close this hearing or leave this hearing open?
You're advised to close the hearing and you can act on it as it stands now. It doesn't require a C of A for the current plan. So the applicant is right on that. That's a conversation that we have with them following their BZA meeting on Thursday.
Thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome.
And before we do close the hearing, just one more call among the commission members. Any other pieces of information that need clarification at this point or need to be retrieved, requested from the applicant? No. Okay, we'll declare the hearing closed for PR-2219, project site review on East Genesee Street House. Is there a motion for action on this application?
Declaration granting requested waivers, particularly the 34 parking spaces, again with a request that working with staff and with the transportation planner, whatever the practical side of this may be, that there's still communication between the applicant and the office to move the project forward.
Your motion addressed a waiver request for parking. There was also a waiver requested by the applicant on the density requirement. Is your...
Also granting the waiver for density requirement.
Thank you.
For clarification on your caveat or condition,
So going forward now, because there's been this separation, and we're very grateful. We commend you for allowing for the other parcel to have access now. Because I'm just saying, at this point, they're saying they don't need to have details about fencing, but still there'll be details about this driveway that's developed, I'm assuming. And it's got to be compliant.
subject to approval from the city transportation planner?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm sorry if I didn't say it at the beginning, but I thought it was part of the notes. I was just making that, yes, whatever the conversation has to be, comply with the notes from the transportation planner. That staff would assist the applicant in doing those things.
I think Kate broke these again, I just want to say. It's her fault. But with respect to your question about communicating back to staff and the transportation, are you talking about the request that he put in about the trees being planted in the parking lot? So the question, I think, will be, let's assume that we go back to him and he clarifies and he's like, here's where I want them. I guess what I'm asking the board is to approve, if that takes up 2 spaces, your waiver would be covering those 2 additional spaces so that the applicant can comply with the parking requirements. Is that correct?
Again, in the practical sense, that's why I'm trying to put that language in there, and the cooperation is needed with the transportation planner, and so the parking waiver right now is at 34. If it needs to be 36, that would be included in this motion.
Perfect, thank you.
Does that make sense to everyone?
Flexible waiver.
I just wanted to point out, you don't, I mean, if the developer feels like they need this parking lot, support them on that, and they can certainly have this parking lot separate from this project site review. You could expand the parking waiver to include those spaces entirely until they come to a conclusion with that plan. That way that parcel is not encumbered by this project site review and can be rebuilt. So you could just expand your parking waiver and just not worry about the parking lot at all.
And again, I'm reading
But it's
the
up to you. I
commission.
mean,
I'm
that's-
thinking for the sense of the commission. I think tonight
Okay.
we want to go with the plan that's in front of us and the request in front of us right now, and that's why I'm making the flexible parking. Footprint is the one they're going to go forward with.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there a second? Is there discussion?
I would encourage, if this is to pass, I just would encourage the applicant to give the landmark preservation board the courtesy of looking at the screening on the joint property line. I don't know that that needs to be included in the motion, it's just a recommendation.
Further discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Project site review is approved for PR-22-19. Our next public hearing, please. Sounds like a good idea. That's what IT always tells me. Yeah, that noise is very distracting.
If it was just this one, I can talk loud enough, and the other microphone still.
A lot of the cords under the desk are taped together, and I know when I kicked mine on occasion, but I am not touching it, but I don't know if that's anybody else's issue, so.
All right, then the next public hearing is AS 2213, a sign waiver to waive the height, area, and number of signs in order to install 2 media mesh signs and 3 window lettering signs on property situated at 235 Harrison Street. The City of Syracuse is the owner, and Center State CEO is the applicant, and the property lies within a central business district office service zoning district.
I apologize.
Yes. Correct.
Yes.
That equipment was making so much noise, it obscured our vote.
So thank you, Brian Bouchard with CHA Consulting, project engineer working on behalf of the applicant with the project as well. Also with me is Andy Wright from QPK Design, who's the project architect. We also have Lori Dietz and Kevin Schwab from Center States. We're here for sign waivers related to the Syracuse Tech Garden expansion project. A little bit of background, I think we're all familiar with the Tech Garden and what they do for the local community in terms of providing business planning services, essentially as an incubator for startups, et cetera. They also host various community innovation events and leadership gatherings. And the project as a whole that you see before you includes proposing to renovate the existing single-story building, which at one point had a past life as a parking garage, then was occupied by the Syracuse Tech Garden. And their new project is to add 2 additional floors to support more office space and meeting spaces to expand the space available for entrepreneurs and the impact on the local community. So this obviously creates a brand new state-of-the-art facility with significantly more floor area to occupy. We've also incorporated a variety of streetscape improvements and sort of interaction at the street level for the project to enhance pedestrian areas along both Harrison and South Warren Street. All of what the Tech Garden does within the city is really obviously driven by technology and innovation, which is what we'll talk about with our intended use of signage for this new building. It is specifically meant to be technologically advanced, innovated, and really engaging at the street level while increasing the visibility of this site and this project, certain programs and services that I'll have Kevin talk about in just a minute. But essentially, this project already received its project site review approval administratively because it complied with the Central Business District regulations. So what we're talking about specifically is the request for the sign waivers for this. With the site plan, and I don't even need to talk. all know as LED reader boards. Some of these that you see kind of around the corner, the War Memorial has a marquee that's an LED reader board. Landmark Theater has a marquee that's a reader board. Town Center, the Civic Center, has LED TVs, basically panels. Similar, except that the media mesh, the LEDs are mounted onto a stainless steel mesh fabric. So it still creates a visual image, but it's 60% transparent. So you can see it in terms of the glazing and the lighting into the building. And you can also see, obviously, the facade of the building behind it. So in our request are various waivers, obviously for size, but also nuances within the code where they don't capture a media mesh. So in terms of the type and the location, really doesn't fall into any standard category for this specific business. And what we would like to show to you is how this is not just a commercial business that's making a product that wants to advertise that product on some sort. Business itself, in terms of its public-facing entity, provides a lot of different things that Kevin can talk about in terms of economic development and what they're trying to do to really transform this area, which exists kind of between the Hotel Syracuse, the Convention Center, the On Center, and the War Memorial. So with that, Kevin Schwab from Center State CEO to talk a little bit about the project as a whole and what they're trying to create here.
Thanks very much. Again, my name is Kevin Schwab. I'm with Center State CEO. I am proudly able to say that we have gone through a lot with this project and in the process have garnered a lot of support along the way. A little background on the Tech Garden though first. As alluded to earlier, the Tech Garden is a collapsed parking garage. And it's funny, I've even had some people along the way say to me, why do you keep saying that? Because if you take a good look at it, it looks like a collapsed parking garage. We have managed to accomplish an awful lot in a facility that had no business ever being a successful business incubator, and outwardly doesn't say. I can tell you between 2000 and 2010, the city of Syracuse, the Syracuse metropolitan area, had an average per capita venture capital investment level of $27 per year. This was the result of a study that was done of markets around and what it meant. This is essentially the bets that the market was taking on your future. The average at that time was over $800. We were dead last. Thanks to the work of the Tech Garden, over the last decade, we are now at $1,327 average per person. We attract entrepreneurs now from all over the world. We've developed companies that you know well and employ hundreds, actually collectively thousands of people in the region, disproportionately folks who live in the city of Syracuse. Surveyed these businesses, and on average more than 40% of their employees are Syracuse residents. In most cases, these companies didn't exist a few short years ago. I'm talking about companies like TCG Player, now with well over 500 employees. Companies like SpinCar, which is now called Impel. Companies like PhotoKite, which has become an emerging leader in the public safety drone space, and now with contracts with some of the largest brands in fire apparatus and police apparatus. I could go on and on about these companies that are now creating a tech corridor up and down Warren Street. Companies like Ephesus, for example, which does sports lighting for arenas and stadiums. That's the unique work of this facility. And yet, and it's a huge success story we should all be proud of. And yet, when we went through this process, what we heard from members of the administration, from the Common Council, most recently from folks at SIDA. You want us to support this project, but nobody knows what you do inside of that building. People go by that building every day, and they have no idea what's happening in there. You need to communicate what happens inside of the tech garden. You need to open it up to the world. We heard particularly from folks saying there are kids in this community who have no idea what it's like to dream of what goes on in the tech garden and how they can be a part of it. And it happens steps away from neighborhoods where these kids live. How do we do this? We also talked with the city, the county, our neighbors, the folks at the Marriott and the county, trying to build a successful convention district where we have done one of the greatest hotel rehabilitations anywhere in the country. And yet, the walk from the Marriott downtown Syracuse to our convention center and to our war memorial actually has become a sticking point for people looking to bring conferences and conventions and business gatherings to our community. Because they look at it and they say, parking garage, building with almost no first floor activity in the evening, all up and down Harrison Street between the Marriott and the onset. So as you can see, we actually have a letter of support from the folks at the Marriott saying one of the things that they requested was to bring light to that walk and to let people see inside. So all of the things that we're asking for variances here tonight are really in response to that input. That input from the administration of the city, that input from the Common Council, that input from SIDA, that input from Marriott, that input from the On Center, that input from the county. We are bringing light to an area right now that is dark and foreboding if you're walking between those two buildings. We are bringing information and excitement about what is going on inside of the tech garden that reflects the type of energy, enthusiasm, and leading edge technology that exists there. And we are inviting the community through this signage to say, I understand what's going on in there. I know I am welcome at events. I know this is a place where I can belong. We allow people to dream if we let them know what's really happening in there. So this is about as unique as you can get in terms of an asset in this community. And through this really carefully thought out approach to building signage that reflects the type of activity in there, to opening up the windowscapes and actually having that writing on these windows into makerspace in the building, right? And to have that signage along the plaza as well, they're all accomplishing what our city, what our county, what our neighbors have asked us to do, and finally getting out.
Thank you. Commission members, questions?
Brian, can you show on this illustration and on the one that's the view from the intersection looking, whatever, northeast, and explain to me how much of the signage can actually be changeable in terms of logo, text, colors, light? So the whole thing can change?
That it's been written into the code. There are certain requirements from the specs that we've given to the staff regarding the fact that this cannot be there are rules as to how this image can change so that it's not just a movie playing. It will honor those regulations, but the answer to your question is that the media mesh that you see here is blue with the Venus logo on it, and also the mesh that you see here. Harrison like a convenience store and having. I think what we will do, not just advertising something. Obviously, we have size. I think the size I have listed, if you don't have.
So size of the mesh signs, not the window details that you just talked about, that's a separate issue. So when it comes to weighting size, it's for these two large mesh systems.
Size is cumulative for the street frontage. So it's not based on an individual sign. It would actually be, Harrison has an allotment of what can be visible from Harrison. So you have this mesh sign with those three logos that do add up to a
So
total.
it's combined, okay.
The other one is location. Again, fairly benign in terms of a waiver request. There's a statement in the code for the central business district, and I mean, we can look at the actual towers, like the size of those things are up there, they're on the upper level, but there's a statement that the sign needs to not be above the first floor of a building unless you are the sole occupant of that. Of the first floor, but obviously we are also not just the sole occupant, because this is not just going to be advertising Center State CEO or the advertise hundreds of different. Last one is the number of signs. One sign per business, one sign per wall. We have the 4 along Harrison, so we're complying along Warren, but there's 4 signs along Harrison. We have one sign per business. What we have done is given you essentially one sign that can accomplish all the needs of the tech garden itself with the multiple startups that they have.
Close enough.
And of course, your tenants change over time, one would hope. They move out and fledge and new ones come in, presumably, right?
Agreed. So
it's-
trying to visualize, giving everybody, technology works for that. And also, like you've said, there's other things that Kevin and I discussed, even the availability to come to a conference or collaborative meeting space, be able to represent all the things that the tech garden does on one side.
So I'm buying your sales pitch, that this is a tech incubator, it's high-tech signage. We approve this. What happens when somebody down Warren Street wants this? Which you said is a tech corridor up and down Warren Street.
So when you look
No,
at.
this is to my attorney friend here.
This is a,
Because I will say, well, I understand, and I'm being serious. I think this is a good idea for a tech garden. The 300 block of Warren Street, I don't think it is. And if that's also a building that has 3 tech-type, innovative, tech-based tenants, how do we say no when they want to do this? Because I don't think that would be appropriate. So I'm very concerned about setting a precedent here. So is the argument, because I'm going to push on this because I'm really concerned. Is the argument then that because the building's owned by the municipality, that's what would prevent a private property owner from saying, well, there wasn't enough room here, so I'm leasing to 3 tech startups. So it's still an incubator. It's just privately owned. I would make that argument if I wanted to sign it.
I think that's another discussion. this a unique situation? And that's what you would have to argue. I mean, I can't figure it out. Project is reviewed based upon the facts and circumstances related to it.
I hear Chris's concerns, and I think you're right. Whatever action taken tonight, whether it's favorable, and whatever commentary we add for the record in justification of a favorable action won't prevent someone else from proposing something comparable and maybe not that far away, but I think this is a singularly unique and distinctive function and purpose, and even location. The context of the location, I think, does separate this, and those are things, if there's a motion, that might be reflected in that motion. And
Actually, that's the question. Should all of that be in the motion, or would that be in the discussion?
Factors regarding this project, I make a motion to X, Y, and Z.
And we can create some whereases based on this conversation when we write up the resolution.
really helpful.
I just want to add, even if you didn't grant this waiver, somebody could still come in. Because
I
this
know,
technology is out
but-
there, so somebody's going to try to use it someplace else. You know?
But
So
I
you're gonna
don't-
have to, like
We don't
Sue
need to
said,
be
you're
the
gonna
people
have to-
opening the door, is all.
Right,
I'm-
right, right.
So,
Right.
okay. Thank you, Paul.
In regards to the mesh signage that they want here, have you guys considered downsizing that a bit? I mean, I think it is something that appeals to the eye, it's going to attract people, but I feel like the size of it can be reduced to somewhat potentially mitigate her concern around, like, it's going to come, it's something that I think can be pretty good for the city, but it's like if we set a precedent, I think we set one closer to what the requirements ask for, rather than just totally going against what's required and then having to have that pushback.
One of the things, more so than size, that we discussed to make sure that, in fact, it would fit, because we feel like it's an integral piece to meet, you know, all those different elements that we talked about, whether it's the attractiveness, the safety, the inviting nature, the ability to sort of make a statement, right, about this, is more in the interest of making sure that the sign is able to sort of brighten and dim appropriately for example, on a clear blue sky, super sunny day, the technology will allow it to be brighter so you can still see it. But then when you get to, you know, this time of the evening, considerably dimmer, you'll still be able to. And so it will not seem as intrusive as you might think of a, you know, think large digital billboard along an interstate highway. It's not like
No, I get that. Again, I'm not focused on that. I'm focused on the size of it, and when we have to potentially down the line explain and basically explain why we went with the sign at that size. If someone wants to do the same thing, if we can't argue, municipality owns the building, but this thing was also done with the idea that it's in the realm of what's required size-wise. And then lastly, like, there's about 4 other signs. Yes, we want to engage the community, something called community engagement that can be done in various ways, and I don't think 4 signs are going to accomplish that. Just from Lynn's perspective, I would say that. So I think we need to focus on the size of this. I get like the illumination and all that, but the size of what I think is really important in regards to what's allowed in that within that corridor. If you follow me, and then my last comment is just, in my opinion, we got to stand 4 signs down at the bottom, along with comparison. Community engagement can be done in various ways, and signage is not the ultimate end-all be-all that's going to really attract demographic that you just mentioned when you explained why the signage was incorporated.
One of the things that we've heard throughout this process is how uninviting the current structure is. And this is what we were requested by the city and by our neighbors. In fact, to flip that on its head. You're exactly right that signs all by themselves will not solve this issue. You all are welcome to join us coming up on the 21st. One of the things that we did, we as an organization worked hard to bring the drone industry to this region. I am incredibly proud of, and it was one of the things we spent a lot of time on with SIDA, of what we have done to integrate that technology into our career and technical education in the city school district, to the point now where we have a leading drone program in the country. And one of the things that we were asked to do was to figure out ways to better integrate it. I mean, this was a mantra over and over again in those conversations. So we're bringing kids in, right? We're literally just saying, no, it's time to bring them in, meet the companies, do the whole bit. We know we have a lot to do. We need more events programming, more community programming, more ways to reach out. But we also heard that, in fact, the physical invite to the community needs to make a bold statement. We've heard that very much from all of our partners and others. So that was part of the input that went into
Lettering, I guess, aren't meant to just casually walk down the street and say, now I know exactly what it is. The interior of that space is actually the collaborative space.
the maker space.
The maker space. So it's sort of an engagement opportunity for people to look, see the words, realize that it's associated with a tech garden, but also see within it to see that maker space and the collaboration space that's inside. So it was purposeful.
And to be clear, when I say that, we're talking about companies that are in there producing hardware. So you will see the sort of high-tech manufacturing and R&D that is going on as you walk by them. And so simply, and the idea was glass, but you don't want it to just be sort of open glass, right? You want to do something to make it visually interesting and break up basically a wall of glass.
So you're bringing the facade out to the edge of the canopy? But I mean, that's the plane. Right.
Lot with the structure and where the underground parking is, but yes, the facade of the building will be at the
And is the drop-off still being maintained then?
No, we completely removed that.
Ah,
curb cut,
okay.
which actually
I couldn't tell from here, okay.
Yeah, it used to exist here, so that's being completely removed, so that this is all pedestrian about.
So it will be a lot.
That, and that's also in keeping with the wishes of neighbors.
Which I appreciate you explaining. I guess it's, again, I'm focused on like the size of like this mesh screen, and I'm proposing that you consider it being like we downsize it. Like it's already like above beyond floor. This way technically should be a thing, but I think this a real precedent will be set in the grant is how big it is. It's still going to be seen, but I think it should be as close as possible. If you're just proposing, it should be more closer to what is recommended size-wise. I'm not saying get rid of it. I'm not saying the screen is like hurting the project. I'm just saying like, just if I actually think of dimensions with like letters on the screen, I don't think if you go down any size and you go down on the size, it's going to change the fonts or anything like that or what is conveyed. I just think it should be a bit taller, especially considering what Kate said regarding to set the precedent. That's something that the commission actively has to be considering.
What are those outside dimensions for that one? Yeah. I'm sorry, I could just look at them.
adding to, is look at the big picture, discussing the fact that we know we have these now movable billboards, right? We've accepted the technology of how we make it so we're still safe, how the pattern changes at the appropriate time, how the brightness doesn't distract drivers of any age. So I understand all these things are incorporated, and you've done homework on this. We respect that. It's just in our evaluation of every project, as I said, scale's a thing. And so while we have made waivers for signs that are markedly larger than what's in, written recommendations, we want to support the project from all sides. We want to support the science that you're applying to sense to have that technology so that people are witnessing that interaction. We're going to support all those things. The size of the actual face of your media mesh is a concern. And we want to put that in, even though you've got a great corridor with the towers there, we still look at every single building. Considering the towers are substantial, the Warren Moyles have got scale to it, and the hotel has scale. There's still an issue of having essentially billboards on the street facing, because in my old Lady Bird Johnson attitude, there was a time when billboards were a thing that you really had to regulate. And so the distance of each billboard was an issue. The scale, the scope of the billboard was an issue. This is opaque, again, using ancient Lady Bird Johnson, Lyndon Johnson fonts. If you're going to pull that curtain down in the building and have this thing flashing, changing every 8 to 9 seconds, there'll be excitement about it. Doesn't need to be 800 square feet is what all of us are asking. Again, trying to adapt the new technology. We tell JMA Wireless and the sponsorship at the Dome that the signs still have to be to scale with the building. We had a discussion about that. You may have heard about it. It was very exciting. We made friends and lost friends. But when people see, well, this is what the hospitals are allowed to do, they have their own set of rules. The Moore Memorial has some different rules. So we do want to be open and inviting when you make these applications and apply for these exciting projects. But at the same time, we just want you to understand why, as we go up and down here, we've told Haley Freyer Kuhn, this is how big your lighted sign can be. We've told law firms, this is how many sides your sign can be on. And again, they will all be listening when they find out at some little, playback on the morning news that the largest sign ever in the city of Syracuse is now going to be flashing and facing the hotel.
Oh, I hope that's not what they would lead
So,
with,
just to let you know, on a slow news day, when everyone else gets along and then the corporation council says we're gaveling for the year, that sign may become a story. So we're not being flippant. We're just trying to let you know there's a reasoning behind our discussion of it. And honestly, I'd like to keep this hearing open just to see we can get a little more input about this. We do homework sometimes before we make our deliberation.
Jeff, is there a, you were having a sidebar. Is there, there's no way to do this because this is so different. George's point, is there a number that's an approvable aggregate number for what all the signs would be that we would then take off from, or is this so different that we can't use some number as a basis? So for example, if it was 100 square feet and we got 10,000 square feet, we're obviously way, way bigger. So we have to think about how we would approve that, or is there a core? They're trying to do math.
And as they do the math, the other thought is, as we think of the billboards, changeable billboards that's at Fayette and Geddes and Erie Boulevard, and there are a couple on 690, again, is there a mathematical equation that says at this height, we establish this size signage?
And while they're doing math, so one thing that just comes to mind, and I always say this, and yet I do it, I hate doing design up here. But so in this example, Brian, the dark colors in the sign, is that basically the floor construction? Yes. Do they correspond with floor construction? Okay. So on the bottom, I guess, if you were just to do this, like just shrink it in from the sides to some yet to be determined dimension, it would still be huge.
Yeah, let's just set the whole idea, like, this whole, like, genius, per se window, each layer, can you tell us what each layer are? The top, the dark part?
I can go through
the
that with you.
second part?
Absolutely.
So then we understand, like, exactly, like, because right now, from my interpretation, this sign is that whole thing, like, all of its mesh is gonna be moving. Okay, perfect. All right, so now go ahead and explain each layer.
So from top
Starting with.
This dark piece right there. So basically a window. Gotcha. So again, kind of the floor construction, windows, floor construction, windows. Okay.
You still have cake.
So we
Still have
have,
cake, though.
during the design process, we evaluated smaller signs, larger signs. How it landed today, we felt, and Kevin described it very well, we want to be a little bit louder than, and kind of spread our wings to show everyone what's going on inside the building. To your point, can it be reduced? It absolutely could be reduced. Structurally, it's very complicated. The wind loads that are exerted on this and where the point loads are being tied back to the building are at the extremes, or at the extent. So we have
So at the top and at the bottom, because behind that is basically,
glass.
well, it's the floor
Yes.
composition.
Correct.
So at the top, you're tying into the top of that.
I am.
What would be the, just tying into the bottom of it? I guess, again,
Yeah.
if you just look at just shrinking it so that it starts above the dark panel, below the dark panel, and you bring it in maybe, for lack of a better word, 1 bay or something, it would be smaller, but it would still be huge. So, again, I don't want us to design it here, but
Understood.
we're all basically saying that size is a concern to us. So maybe thinking about, could it be reduced, and if it could, by how much to still achieve what you
Yeah.
want, but to address our concerns.
Yeah. So you had a valid question to the staff. Is there a size that we're trying to achieve?
Yeah, I don't, is math done?
Oh, I mean, it's not even close.
It's not even.
So,
close.
and that's where,
Comparable.
Right.
and that's where I was going to go, is that, so,
This is a unique
Right.
project with a unique site.
Right.
With all due respect to Kevin.
I don't know that any of us are concerned about the technology. I think it's more the size of it.
Orly, I don't think there is a comparison to be made in the rules that we have.
Okay.
They don't anticipate anticipate this. This is an unusual and unique situation.
I would like to make, or ask for one point of clarification. I'm sorry, I didn't get the third gentleman's name or. You just mentioned a few minutes ago that the sign is from corner to corner, top to bottom.
Got it.
Could you clarify that, because that's not what is illustrated there, and that's not what is illustrated on the plan submitted
Corner to corner
of the glazing?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yeah. So,
thank you. Then I would just offer for, as a point of clarification, the sign material is not in question tonight. As far as the waiver, the mesh material is not in question. What's before you is the total, and there are different waivers for different signs, and some waivers apply to multiple signs, some waivers don't. But the fact that it's mesh or a plexiglass or plywood is not an issue.
Right, right. I think we're on that page.
Let's see if anyone would like to comment. So thank you for the presentation, review. Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of this application? Like your name and address and comments? Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition to the application? Please come forward to do so. So the public is not speaking on this either way. There's a lot of engagement with the commission members this evening. Yes. Thank you. Care to this. I will defer to my colleagues. I have a sense, perhaps, here to remain open, but perhaps not.
So I do have a request, I do have a request. Even though I know some of it involves the Department of Transportation at the state level, if there is any way to determine the mathematical equation for the billboards that we have. As I said, I know private sign is Duncan Bragg, but the public billboards that are commercial, but at the same time they're changeable. The one that's Fayette and Geddes is an example of the place. It's a very public place, so there are a lot of cars that go by there every day safely without an incident. I just want to understand that everyone will go and so I'm glad about the change in billboards. Go ahead.
Talking about the size of the billboard?
So, right, how the
Or
size is determined. I would
well,
just like that
I can
information.
actually tell you.
That's what I'm looking at.
That size is based upon the industry standard. I know this because the town I used to work for, very long process to pass the
Yes,
sign
and
regulations.
I remember doing that.
And they cut it in half, and they made a different size, and Park Outdoors lobbied us every year to change it because they had to get, that size is really based upon.
It's not the
It
screen,
has
it's
nothing
not
to
the
do with the
technology.
screen at all.
It was
It's just what they already own as a sign. In a lot of cases, they can't actually replace the sign without a lot of hassle. They're the same size as what they used to print.
So regardless of what they put up there for, I apologize for this. Oh, no, you're good. But regardless of whether they put up the fact that it's a fundraiser, or it's an actual ad, those signs that we see around town are actually based on what the old font had.
New ones you'll see, like on big interstates that are LED, they'll be bigger because they're farther away, they're higher up in the air.
Okay. So there's no standard for those.
I will offer that the sign regulations do regulate the size of off-premise. Probably is the industry standard. If the standard, if the looking for some sort of guidance or standard applied to this situation.
They're apples to apples. We asked certain apartment complexes if they wanted to put up tower signs. We said even with 3 apartment structures on Brighton Avenue, that column sign they wanted to put up initially was remarkable. And so we were able to come to a compromise where they showed us scale of the original sign, the one they used in South Carolina, and made it fit on Brighton Avenue. And I'm just fine. So I'm just saying that when we have these conversations, trying to compare the scale of a sign, and if it turns out with our homework that nothing will change and it has to be the entire glazing of the building, I'd be able to live with that because then I've done some due diligence. It's just the request that we're all asking up and down the panel here, and the commission saying that could you just show us if there was a way to achieve what you're looking for with a different scale of sign. And if it's not structurally sound or if it's not safe, I would accept that answer. I think that's what we're doing tonight. But again, when we do anything, any type of factor needs to go. Even the corporate council saying don't do that.
Well, I think though that we have expressed a concern about size. So when we've had this issue in the past with applicants, we've asked the applicant to go back and look and see if they could make it smaller. So whether there's a direct link to a previous application or not, I think the idea that we're just asking, is there a way to make it somewhat smaller, is a valid request of the applicant. And if it happens to relate to what we've done in the past, but at least we're asking the applicant, is there any way it could be smaller to achieve their goals, but also to address our concerns that this is substantially large and we have concerns about that.
For the record, has the applicant answered that question?
Not to my satisfaction.
During the design process, we went through smaller signs, and ultimately, prior to engaging started the conversation during the daytime. We still want that engagement from inside to outside, outside to inside. So reducing the actual glazing or the extents of the structure, the 4 points I'll call them, would ultimately, I would probably have to start shrinking the glazing. That's going to go against what we described earlier for having that inviting interior and exterior communication between outside and inside. So
That's floors 2 and 3, so there's really none of that happening anyway.
I would disagree. Politely disagree.
Okay.
Second floor, when there is an event or people are working, as of right now, when you walk by the tech garden, you can't see anyone working. There is no engagement. So, when someone walks by this building right now, the lights are on, they can see that someone's at the podium, and you can see that engagement. So as soon as you start to reduce that vision glass, you're reducing that engagement.
So we have engagement at the bottom.
Yes.
Like people can see inside
Yes.
and so forth, right? So you're telling me right now, you're willing to say hypothetically, to sort of, say this like, jeopardize this project over second floor.
Guys, the project.
Like, just, I'm saying hypothetically, like, if this was to be a defining factor in this going forward, yay or nay, you're telling me right now, you already have the sign, on the lower level, the sign on the lower level. Then you have about 4 signs, not a couple, I guess 4 like, signs totally with the, verbiage. And then this bigger sign. So you're telling me right now, with all that at the bottom, which I think is in my opinion, a lot of engagement, that the second floor, you're willing to like put all your chips on saying the second floor has to have the amount of engagement you're saying in visibility, or like you wouldn't want to do anything else. I'm saying there's a lot of signage, a lot of engagement. Our point is like there has to be, in my opinion, some way to just slightly downsize this. And I would like to see, honestly, I would like to see the other option. I feel like there has to be another option on the, again, size of this larger mesh. We have a lot of engagement at the bottom. I don't think, in my opinion, this should be a dividing factor. It should be somewhere meet in the middle.
Break in
That's correct.
to put a smaller sign.
What were the other sides of this? Say, or the other, so I think ultimately, we are, let's, as colleagues of suggestions, it's open, and let's propose two of the other options, or two other options along with this.
So, one comment question on that. And it was to the point that, what is the size that we're all? Because I don't want to sit here and redesign, spin the wheel to come back and it's still too loud. So, if there is a threshold that we're trying to achieve, threshold is fine.
anchor it where you need to anchor. Or instead of being not quite square, maybe it's more horizontal rectangle to deal with how it has to be pinned in the building. We're asking you just to see, can you make it somewhat short, smaller?
And I very much
Sorry. Is your microphone just something?
My application was denied.
just to like make sure we're on the same page. I very much think this is like beautiful, city needs the light. this lower level, like, imagery and signage is, in my opinion, an issue, but I think it's much more important. And then the bigger sign, we should let it be a fine dining center, but we can let it on the side. I don't know why we're also that's going on top of the sidewalk. The first floor level is self-storage.
At the risk of shooting a dead horse even more, I understand the discussion about the size of the sign. So I'm just going to put out there for minuscule discussion. Revise their proposal at any time. Are you set on 2 mesh signs, or can one mesh sign that's angled facing the intersection suffice if that satisfies?
I don't think that's the issue. What we've been discussing is that specific sign and the size of it.
We haven't even mentioned the other ones.
I understand. This one is on the west facade facing Warren Street, correct?
It's on an angle, but yes.
Oh, this is the angled one.
This is the angled facade.
Yeah, I stand corrected.
Okay.
Yeah.
Take me out of
Yeah,
this.
we're okay with the other ones.
And
This
then
is what we've been talking about.
Respectfully, particularly given the time and the concerns that we have about the and the cost, frankly, associated that we've already seen with the land. Is it possible to do something this evening that would be contingent? This project has already seen significant.
Kind of have another comment, and then I can take that one. Also, something that kind of slipped my mind, but it just came to me. With this sign being the size it is, let's be in the, consideration of, this is right across from the hotel. Like, the size of this and how much it illuminates, like, we think of it, as I said earlier, I think it's great, but it almost can be weird for someone in the hotel. Like, this is too bright. You know, potential. Because it's not that, it's like
the
pretty
brightness.
close.
Forgive me, sorry about that. The brightness adjusts based on the condition. Also, the hotel has expressed their support for this design.
I understand.
They are very aware of it. They were involved, frankly, in every step of this.
That's fair.
And they've submitted a letter of support as well.
Thank you.
That's one of the, not there, but before I decided it completely, that's one of the, what I think for later, large signs, is consultation with neighboring businesses and institutions. It appears you've done that based on the letter that we have here, and I'm not always sure that when some of these other outsized signs are proposed in the application, the same type of consultation is proposed with institutions. That's one of the distinguishing factors of this kind of deliberation. Project appears so.
If the project were to go forward without that sign being now, question involves trying to get something fixed. We voted on all of it, voted down once, and I'm saying now they have to come back with a construction plan, right? And now we get a new discussion about that side. They already have the window. I think that's just one of the reasons I think we're all looking at leaving it open. It's a struggle. I understand.
If law department has a suggestion, handy-dandy suggestion in your pocket about a workable conditional motion that could be considered tonight, let's hear it.
Can I ask a
But-
question? Because when I saw this application, when I first saw it, I thought, wow, it's a big sign. But I think the intent, but then when I saw the plaza that you're creating and the relationship to the hotel and the street, I think the intent of this size sign, which is almost twice the size of a billboard, which sounds like a lot, but it's literally almost exactly twice the size of a billboard. It's 896 square feet, and a billboard is 440 square feet. So, I'm off by 10 feet, but whatever. But then when I realized that if you just had a billboard size sign, then you would have a billboard. And the intent here is to activate this space and have something unique and special that fits the building. Well, that's something that I haven't heard yet. So from a planning perspective, I was like, oh, that's kind of, have like this space, and you have not only next to the building or in front of the building, but you have across the street with a hotel and people coming out. Offering that, like, if it was smaller, then it would just be another billboard. And maybe it wouldn't have the same impact. I don't know.
I don't know that it has to be as small as a billboard.
Okay.
Again, it could be 10% smaller, and that might be enough. But without a drawing that illustrates it,
Okay.
it's just hard
I
to
gotcha.
tell.
All right.
So in terms of conditional approval,
Well, I think the concern though that Walter raised is a good one, that if we approve everything but this sign and they move ahead with construction documents, they firm up the design of the building, which then could be, well, now we can't reduce the size of the sign because we didn't make any modifications, so it could be a fixed. Oh. So would we,
I like your bluntness.
I'm just telling you like it is.
would we,
We all like
She is a lawyer, but she's not giving legal advice.
Kevin asked for something really serious.
I like your bluntness.
so would we then see just this sign under old business?
I would caveat that to consider approving art. Art, leave this one out. Back of the subject.
But why couldn't we hear it under old business?
But
I mean, if our motion says, and we will continue to review this under old business,
and I'm not able to sign off on any building permits for signs until this is resolved. I would not be able to sign off on the building permit for the Warren Street sign.
oh, because it's a package and all the calculations are based on.
I could signs, but back, redesign, sign in question and come back.
I think that this is
Just to muddy the water some more.
Because we have this meeting and nothing else happened anywhere because of notice issues. Should we hold a special meeting on this one item?
I mean, we're trying here to work with this, but we like the whole budget thing. I humbly, respectfully understand. It's something I take into consideration with everything. However, that being what you propose, there's a million projects who has like budget issues, and for us to make a decision based on you saying that, we're basically telling the rest of like applications coming forward, hey, just say you have a budget issue, and like you know you're gonna get what you want. So I do understand. It's probably not something that you understand, but we can't like give you a leg up because of the budget issue. Personally.
dollars for this, and this was when this began, and it was pre-pandemic, but we had to make sure the viability of the project would still go, and it started as a $17 million project. It's now a $24.5 million project. We are doing our level best with this city property to make sure that we are going to create the best possible project and to be the best stewards of those funds.
Team, I think you guys have to figure out that on the budget aspect.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, really.
What
He can't do the math for the sign.
I know, yeah.
So, again,
The comment about a potential special meeting is rare.
It's rare and
We have done it, and the complicating factor would be the year-end calendar, which I'd be open to it, but I'm not sure how much we might be able to get a week or
You and I did the last meeting. That's why. I was counting the days between the 12th and January might come meeting, but I don't think it's the last week of December.
It's the ninth.
yeah, and we're getting into parts now. Yeah. So, everyone.
Possibility. That's the reason why we need to. Last week in December,
I think where we end up tonight is probably the place that makes no one totally happy. But I
We don't
think
want to muddy the waters. We don't need a special meeting. We'll take the night.
All right, great.
so. We'll leave the hearing open.
Thank you.
Thank
Yep.
you.
You'll huddle, and
Yes.
you've heard the comments about size, and see if there's something you can,
We
Any
will read,
reduction.
that might
Yes.
address
Any
that.
reduction.
Yeah, because we haven't even tried.
Yeah, any
I'm
reduction.
gonna,
Oh, Brian.
add one thing.
It's okay.
The surprise sign that you didn't tell us about.
We submitted,
that's not happening.
two-dimensional building elevations with proper dimensions. This is obviously,
It's a high resolution.
It's a rendering.
Yes.
So
Right.
What we may have to give to you is drawings that investigate the two-dimensional aspect of the elevation
That's correct.
or the size, and probably use this to maybe approximate what it would look like a rendering.
Yeah.
We could do something, but it may not be the full gamut in order to send this back out and spend more
Yeah,
dollars to make it look pretty like we have.
No,
So I
you could do something on AutoCAD and stick it on top of this, and that'd be okay.
just didn't want to get to the point and say.
No, I'm glad you said what the expectation.
Because you're also going to be here to walk us through this, whatever
Yes.
you come
Yes.
up
Well,
with.
and a lot of it is you see the perspective and the image with this, and all the problems like that.
Right.
Two-dimensional things, you may not have had it. So I wouldn't want to come back and say this is all we have and then have trouble for the commission to understand it and not really just.
That's a question, just because we've been talking, I think one of the things we're struggling with is, I understand you're questioning the size of the sign, but I don't know what the impact is that we're trying to avoid.
I'm sorry?
I don't know what the impact is that we're trying to avoid. What are we trying
I think
mitigate?
there's two issues. One is just the size of it.
But what about the size
It's
is
incredibly
offensive?
large, and we tend not to have signs of this size in our central business district consistently, which has nothing to do with technology, it's the size of it. So I think we've all expressed concern about that. But we're behind the concept of the technology and the light and all of that, it's just the size of it.
I guess that's what I'm
Or
trying to get at.
correct me.
What about the size
It's
of-
too big.
is, that's not an impact. But I'm trying to get at what do you feel is gonna affect the city?
The negative
What
impact
is the
from that
negative
size
impact
is
from
what
that
he's
size? I'm not questioning, I just wanna know,
Well, how about from the positive end, not the negative end?
sure, whatever, yeah.
So, given the character of downtown and the anticipated improved character, does this sign need to be that size to achieve that goal? And right now, our visceral response is no. It could be smaller and still achieve their goal and still be appropriate for the central business district.
And it's not alone. When you think we talk about impact, we're talking about, it's a wonderful dynamic space for development. The building, I think we all, if you're a design person, we enjoy the light, the building will enjoy the possibilities, it's got the light, it's light through the first level. But as the millennial said, that height, the absolute height, the absolute expanse of that level, all of it being signage, we do just want to know if there's any way to scale that. Because again, I come back to the what's on top of the AXA Tower, what's on top of Hayward, Pryor, and Croon over here, what we let Barclay Damon have. The conversation is citywide. It's the scope of all, the entire cityscape. And so she's a design professional, the rest of us are lay people, and we are very impressed by what you've done. We commend you for it. We do just want to know what else is possible and still work with your design. Because that is, go ahead.
I was going to say, this might not be the best example, but if we think about the university hospital signs, if we had been asked about those, I would have had the same concerns. It's the logo, it's the colors, great. Does it have to be that big to achieve what the university wanted, which was identification, wayfinding? I would argue no. And especially since there are, 8 of them that are that big. They really didn't need all of them. So again, it's not the concept. It's just whether or not this size is necessary
It's
to
the
achieve the
scale.
concept. And character.
All right.
So, which
So
we
it's like
get,
the scale in relationship to the,
Right.
Yes.
to the space.
We asked
I got
all
it.
the other businesses in
Okay.
town,
Yep.
St. Joseph's Hospital, we asked all the others
Gotcha.
to just consider the scale and
Yep.
the impact overall in the neighborhood with the signage.
Okay.
And that's just the request we're making.
and I would say that after this very lengthy conversation, I would feel comfortable, once we've gone through this exercise and maybe have a smaller sign, that my concerns about precedent, I've been thinking about how I would formulate a motion that would talk about the uniqueness of this situation. But I think, again, once we've looked at whether or not it can be any smaller, that would just make all those other arguments stronger. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you all for,
Yeah.
I think, a great conversation.
Well, thanks for your patience.
It's a good thing we didn't have to talk about the whole building, right?
I think it's actually
cheering.
pretty,
We're going to talk about the whole building.
We're cheering the building, we are.
Yeah.
it's such an improvement.
Well,
I mean, it's a collapsed parking garage.
Well, yeah.
You know.
Well, you'll have to abandon that reference. Doesn't
I will
abandon-
be glad when I can abandon that reference.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
Thank you very
patience,
much.
really.
Thank you.
Have nice holidays.
This hearing remains open, and we have business.
Yes, moving on to new business. The first item is a 3-mile limit review of.
Now we get to the good
Nixon
stuff.
I'm sorry?
We get to the good stuff now.
Yes.
Now
The
that we're
Nixon
warmed
Gear
up.
LLC subdivision in the town of Onondaga to divide one property into 2 new lots. Property situated at 4601 Nixon Park Drive. Nixon Gear LLC, the Wide Waters Group Incorporated is the owner, and Joseph Scuderi is the applicant. The purpose of the subdivision is to facilitate the construction of 3 storage buildings. The town of Onondaga approved the re-subdivision on August 22nd of this year. It was reviewed by the City Department of Engineering, who had no issues. And the town of Onondaga made a negative secret determination on June 13th.
Thank you. So with the approval from the city engineer, is there, first of all, are there any questions on this
I'm set.
3-mile limit case? And if not, knowing that the city engineer's office has signed off on this, is there a motion for action on 3S2214?
To move approval. This is down by Dragon subdivision.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Abstentions? So the town of 3-mile limit is approved. We also have one in the town of Camillus.
3S0909M6, a 3-mile limit subdivision review of the Malibu Hills Estate, Section 3, in the town of Camillus to divide one property into 9 new lots. Tax parcel 015.1-06-12.4 on Malibu Hills Drive is the property address. Snowbirds Landing 2 LLC is the owner, and Ronald Milbeck is the applicant. The purpose of this subdivision is to create 8 buildable single-family lots. The 9th lot will be the remainder of the tax parcel. The City Planning Commission has approved a number of subdivision, 3-mile limit subdivisions regarding Malibu Hills Estates, as listed in your agenda. The city engineer reviewed the subdivision. There were no issues, and the town of Camillus made a negative secret determination on June 13th.
Thank you. Any questions on the town of Camillus 3-mile limit case?
I'm all set.
Is there a motion? Thank you. Second. Thank you. Discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? The town of Camillus 3-mile limit case is approved. We have a couple of old business items. Jeff, would you introduce the first one, please?
The first old business item is SB 2204, a special permit for a restaurant on property situated at 3902 to 3916 and 3922 South Salina Street. ARG AR16 PCK 001 LLC is the owner. Gail Craig Thompson is the applicant. The properties lie within a business Class A zoning district. The City Planning Commission held public hearings on August 8th, August 29th, September 19th, October 11th, and November 21st, closing the public hearings on November 21st, thereby starting the 62-day deadline to render a decision. That deadline is today. Failure to render a decision tonight will allow the application to be approved automatically. Having said that, during the public hearings, members of the public did comment that the site's currently used as a live entertainment venue and expressed concerns about insufficient and uncontrolled parking, excessive and unsafe vehicular traffic, pedestrian safety, noise, and other matters. The proposal as currently proposed requires 107 off-street parking spaces. I did receive an updated site plan this afternoon that presents a total of 69 off-street parking spaces, consisting of 39 spaces on site and 30 spaces on property situated at 4141 South Salina Street, known as Valley Plaza. The applicant has provided a parking license agreement for the 30 spaces at Valley Plaza. I took a look at the site plan this afternoon. The parking spaces I measured do appear to be 8.5 feet wide by 18 feet long. However, the proposal continues to be short at least 38 off-street parking spaces. As a reminder, the proposed parking at Valley Plaza necessitates waiver of the parking location, in that parking for live and/or electronically amplified entertainment must be available on-site, adjacent to or directly across the street from the establishment within which the entertainment is provided. So based upon the current set of plans on file with the zoning office, the proposal necessitates 7 waivers from the zoning regulations. First is a parking waiver, again, to allow 69 off-street parking spaces in lieu of 107 required spaces. A waiver to maintain an existing 40-foot wide driveway as measured at the property line on South Salina Street. A waiver from the on-site curbing requirements. A waiver to maintain a street line treatment area with a width of 6 feet along South Salina Street and 7 feet along Valentine Road, as opposed to the 8 feet required. A waiver to allow live and/or electronically amplified entertainment within 300 feet of a residential zoning district. A waiver to allow parking for live and/or electronically amplified entertainment at 4141 South Salina Street, as well as a waiver to maintain an existing parking area with a setback from South Salina Street of less than 7 feet in lieu of the required 10 feet.
Site plan?
Yes, absolutely. I even have extra techniques at home.
Thank you.
So if it will help, I would like to just point out the commission can approve the application as proposed, granting all the requested waivers. You can approve the application in part, granting waivers for some deviations.
I am talking to myself.
We are,
No judgment, so were we.
That's
we're
what
back
happens
to
when we turn
doing
the mics
math
off.
for the 10th time tonight.
Yes, math is not.
And the size of the billboard is much simpler than the size of a parking space, so.
I will point out that the site plan I received this afternoon able to check my email before we vote.
So I will ask, while they're looking, I'll ask staff, looking at the site plan during, and passed out tonight, this indicates 94 possible spaces. Is that you done that? The required parking is 107, but the actual available spaces,
Don't go by the table on the site plan.
that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, if
Okay.
you don't have, the leases aren't in hand, so.
Okay,
Right, so we're not counting the Family Dollar though.
we're not.
So there's theoretically 39 on site and 30 with one agreement.
Correct.
Okay. This one here.
And I will just point out, if you do have questions for clarification, the applicant is here.
Yes. Yep.
So, I, the site plan, this site plan, back out right there. I still have concerns about the site plan. It's admittedly, some of the issues that were pointed out before have been corrected, but there are still some things on here that give me pause from a design perspective in terms of whether or not this parking arrangement can work. In addition to that, requiring 7 waivers for any application gives me pause. That's a lot of deviation from the rules that are established for this zoning classification. And I said this, I don't remember which of our meetings, but I'm somewhat afraid that we're trying to put 10 pounds of sugar in a 5-pound bag. So, it's late, and I don't want to keep any of this here, so I'm going to make a motion to move this along. And that motion is to deny this without prejudice, which would give the applicant time to reconsider whether or not the site can be better used for parking and then obtain perhaps some off-site agreements. But for the other waivers that can be addressed on the property, for example, the 40-foot driveway, some of the curbing and landscaping issues, I think it gives the applicant time to perhaps address them sufficiently as to not require all those waivers. So my motion is to deny without prejudice.
I would like to ask a question or two for clarification.
Sure.
I understand your comments about parking. Could you please provide some comments with respect to the waiver to allow live and/or electronically amplified entertainment within 300 feet of a residential zoning district?
My recommendation would be that the applicant should talk to the residents and see if they can get response that would support the application, which is what we've seen happen in other situations where there might be concern, but the folks who would be concerned, like what we saw Syracuse in the last application, where the applicant reached out to ascertain whether or not there were any objections. So I would think that would be something important for the applicant to do, and then to provide that level of evidence to us, because any residents who are nearby who've gone on the record are opposed to this. So, again, I think having the time to perhaps sit down and look at these, maybe interacting with staff more, perhaps relying on their current or different design consultants to help them work through some of these issues might make for a stronger application, and that we might be able to approve.
Understood. I did earlier.
Yeah, George.
That's in place. Further discussion. Discussion that all in favor of the motion, say aye. Opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Motion is approved. Carried out.
Bottom line, you'll have to submit a new application, but we can discuss that. Thank you.
Business item?
CA 2212A, a certificate of appropriateness appeal at 115 Wendell Street. Catherine Fernandez is the owner and the applicant. Property lies within a residential class A1 zoning district. On October 11th and November 21st. The applicant is appealing a decision by the Landmark Preservation Board denying a certificate of appropriateness to install an 18-inch tall landscape earthen berm. They denied the application on August 4th, noting that the berm as installed creates a visual barrier that's incompatible with the historic open setting and negatively impacts the visual character of the streetscape. The commission did receive attorney-client correspondence.
Clarification, as I understand it, based on a review of the ordinance, the Preservation Board has to decide whether the soil burn constitutes a change to the contour of the land, first test, and then the second test is whether or not that proposed change is material. And what we have on the record is that they've said yes to both of those, and therefore it will deny one. Or they divide, deny the seating. And that's what the applicant says.
I'll also point out that Kate Atwater is here.
Right.
And,
She's been a,
yes.
so, no, well, it's printed and I don't have to look at my little tiny screen. Thank you. Did I not read that somewhere?
Yeah, I read that too.
So that differs from what Sarah just said, yeah?
You're referring to the memo I provided you on December 9th. I have extra hard copies if anyone would like one.
Is,
If that aids.
is that the document in which there's a reference to the jurisdiction of the,
It's
not the planning
attached.
board, the preservation board with respect to vegetation?
Yes, it is attached as an exhibit to the memo that was circulated yesterday, so Sarah can hand that out and you can see that.
So, but specific to the landscaping issue, what I'm reading here is that based on an analysis of the current language of the preservation ordinance, can I quote from this into the record? That the LPB does not have the authority to regulate landscaping and plantings?
That
Or
is
is
the
it,
position of my office, yes.
so are we, is that something that we're also responding to in our action?
Yes, you need to make a decision whether they there's two issues here.
Right.
It's the landscaping as well as the berm. Because a reading of the legislation says that they can regulate changes to contours of land. A berm would be allegedly, if you made the determination that the berm was a change to the contour of the land, then that falls within their authority to review, and then they go on and do the analysis to determine if it's material. Nowhere in the legislation does it give the authority to the Preservation Board to regulate landscaping. Now, they have included landscaping in their rules and regs, but the rules and regs, in my opinion, go beyond their statutory authority, and I don't believe you can alter your statutory authority through regulations.
And if we want to make a finer point of structure as opposed to landscaping.
Correct.
That the original idea of the ordinance and all the statutes were regarding historic locations, historic structures, and then all things attached to the historic structures
Correct.
for construction alteration.
So the way the key sentence is that material change of appearance, the word structure is the noun in the sentence, and that's what trips this wire. If it just said changes to the property.
Different analysis.
Yeah, okay, which is the problem with 1970 preservation ordinances.
Do not disagree.
And
They
contours.
were architecture centric.
And contours aren't very specific either. I mean,
Well-
we're talking like 5-foot contours, or we're talking about 1 foot?
Right, because
Contours, you
architects
know,
wrote this.
yeah.
With all due respect.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any of them in the room?
No, and we prefer the broad designation of design professional.
Yeah, there you go. That's what we like.
Range of.
Okay. And in addition, the record shows that this particular applicant has not often, not consistently complied with the C of A process.
Correct.
Do we know if, with the exception of this, that they are okay right now with whatever they're doing?
I would have to call on Kate if she would be willing to tell us. I don't know if currently they have a new application for any new work they've done or are anticipating doing. All I know is historically,
Okay.
as set forth in the memo, there were times when they did not follow compliance.
Well, we don't know what the average is for the neighborhood either. They're under a magnifying glass, so, I mean, if we looked at every single property, would we find things that they, oh, that could have gone, or that could have gone, I mean,
But again, in our deliberations, we look at what's available, which is this
Right,
particular
that's right.
application, this particular set of facts and circumstances, and we're trying to apply our role, which is a step back from the initial board to have to deal with this application. So we're trying to crunch all those factors into the equation.
And it's not just a berm, there are things on top of the berm at this point?
Trees.
So,
Yeah,
you can't.
to be specific.
I don't even think they're, I think they're spruce, I think. No? They are? Doesn't look like it.
So, I'll make the motion to say, all my coworkers, I'll be the one to step in, and not be the giant, and then turn around and none of you will be there. That's okay. No, I'm just saying, this is how it works in the daytime. Okay. again, on its construction of the statute that empowers lands, the boards, like in this case, a preservation board, if our interpretation is correct, that the focus is on the structure in the particular district.
Can I say something before you make your motion?
I'm open to friendly amendments.
No, not an amendment.
Okay.
A thought as you construct.
I will take a thought.
So aside from the preservation board's examination of the two prongs, is it a change to the contour? Yes, they said. Is it material? Did it change the appearance of the property? They also said yes.
Yes.
So one might consider that it is a change, but maybe it's not material, in addition to where you were going before. So just some food for thought.
Well,
Hold 1 second.
Well, kind of to Chris's point, I think the other thing that's important for a board, a discretionary board to consider is the public testimony. You had a lot of people from that neighborhood that said,
Understood.
we don't care. It's not a material change.
Right.
It doesn't affect our neighborhood. It doesn't affect, this is an appropriate treatment for our neighborhood. We accept this, right? Or however you want me to say it.
Well,
So that's just one more factor to kind of like,
right.
it is,
yep.
because we do take into consideration the public's view, but the preservation board, unlike this body, is comprised of people who theoretically are experts. So yes, you should take into consideration what the neighborhood's feelings are about a project,
Right.
but on the other hand, there's a certain level of expertise, hopefully, that they brought to their deliberations, which is why if you think about the two prongs, is it a change to the contours? Yes, they changed it by however many inches or 1.5 feet or whatever the math is. The question is it material? And we have the neighbor's view of that, we have the preservation board's view of that, and that potentially could be what this body would focus on, as well as where you were going with the idea of a structure.
Right. So going to, as I said, the statute that enables all preservation boards, apply it in this situation, the idea of structure and really the things that attach, not the property, but attach to structure. If we look at the test and we say when there's a state action, now we're bringing it down to local boards like the preservation board and then our body. One of the considerations is the idea of fairness, and did the decision in some way would the decision go against what's fundamentally fair? The other part of that would be the prongs to the test. Is there a change? Is the change material? So my motion is going to be that in this case, we grant the requested appeal, applying fairness argument that, well, now the condition exists. And sometimes existing conditions we factor in other times when we do site plans. The population that came here, about 30 speakers spoke to the issue of their opinion as lay people that it fit in the neighborhood. So granting the appeal is not saying that the preservation board did something wrong, but that in this one instance, it would be appropriate now to accept the current condition and to find that the change is not material in this sense, that we're allowed to review what the preservation board did. So I would move to grant the appeal.
Second.
Discussion.
I think it's important for the record to emphasize what Walter just said, that in this one instance, given the factors he laid out, that this is unique to this set of circumstances, and the record also should show that unfortunately there is a history with this particular applicant and this property for not always following the rules, and that should be very clear in the record, and that it is also that they're not being rewarded for not following the rules. It's just that, no, I don't want to say that. And that they should be made aware by whoever needs to make it clear to them so that it makes a difference that this is not an acceptable method of moving forward with any other work at the property. It should be crystal clear that what they've just been through is not something that they want to do again, and they need to follow the rules.
And I just note for the record before we vote that we do not have to review decisions by this preservation board very often.
Correct.
So this is, again, in this one instance, in this occasion, we are making our review of another board's actions. We respect what that board did. We're
Yes.
just looking at the procedural aspect of it.
Additional comment or discussion, this is helpful. I would underscore what Chris has said about, shall we say, flaws in following the process that the applicant should have observed. And this is not intended to reward that behavior. If there is no further discussion,
Just to that point, if this motion were to pass, again, it has, I don't know if it's in the cover letter with the resolution, if it's in the resolution, if it's both, but I think the record, our minutes need to be clear about this, and then any correspondence with the applicant has to make this point very clear, especially about future work at the property.
I would offer then that if there is specific language you would like incorporated into the resolution, you can state it, and I can certainly put it in the resolution, either as a whereas statement or as a be it further resolved statement.
And I would offer to you that I will work with staff to draft the resolution and
The
submit it to
spirit
the
of that
board
comment.
before we finalize it and get it out.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just so there's time limits on that.
further conversation on this motion.
Isn't it 5 or 10 days or something? Good, see how I got that?
And if there is no further discussion, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Nay. Any abstentions? Motion passes 3-2. And we will work to make sure the minutes, resolution, and so forth reflect the spirit of the comments that were made in the discussion phase. We have a calendar to adopt, or discuss and then adopt for 2023. This was presented last time. We want a little bit of time to review. Oops. I have one printed copy here. And I can maybe bring up another one here. We wanted to
I think it's on Dropbox.
review dates to make sure we were it's here. Almost all of them are Monday meetings is typical, with the exception of February and then October, where we move a day later in the week to a Tuesday to avoid the holiday, Indigenous people in Columbus Day in October and President's Day in February. So in those two instances, we'll have Tuesday meetings, and I believe this has been synced up, Jeff, with the council calendar so that it goes as smoothly as it can from items that come before the commission and then need to go to the council, so it minimizes the, gap of time in between. So that is to help applicants. Avoids key holidays, if anyone, scroll down for
Well, there are two holidays there are 2 holidays where meetings would have to be moved to a Tuesday.
Right, yeah, February and October, just mentioned that, so, and we've done that before, so that's not unusual for the commission. If it looks okay, seems okay from what I can tell. It'd be good to adopt this tonight so that we have our schedule someplace so people know what meetings will be for 2023. It's on the calendar, or does it seem reasonable?
It's good with me.
Do we need a motion?
Yeah.
Move to approve the proposed calendar.
Second.
Discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? We have a meeting scheduled for 2023. We also have, or need to authorize.
Before we do the authorization, there is one additional item for discussion.
So, as you are probably aware, the Common Council voted and closed, then completed the seeker process for rezone on the 5th, I believe. And what, if it's okay with the commission, what we'd like to do is have a joint meeting between the commission and the Common Councilors, the committee, right? Is that what we decided? Something like that. I think it's Paul Hogan's committee, Pat Hogan's committee. Paul Hogan is a
Wrestler.
professional wrestler, right? Yes, I'm sure.
He's
In
not
another life, Pat was.
May have been Crocodile Dundee, yes.
Yes, yes. So, so the idea is to have a joint meeting to go over the law itself, and especially the changes from the 2019 version to the version that will be put forward for adoption, which will all be color-coded and line straight, so you'll be able to see kind of what the changes are pretty easily in the document. And it'll be more of a presentation, and then the order of events go, it will come to you for an official public hearing and vote. And I believe the idea now is that that would be the public hearing for the law, in theory anyways, unless the Common Council decides to hold one of their own. And then it will go to the Common Council review, and then they will vote on it, and that will be it.
My guess is that they will hold their own public hearing, if I had to guess, but maybe not.
That's up to you.
Not me, but.
Oh, yes, it is. It's not up to
Would it
me.
be a-
It's not.
Would it be a special meeting for the commission to entertain this?
So we want to give you kind of like a chance to hear it presented, what the changes are,
Right.
what the ideas are behind those changes, you know, the purpose, how they fit with seeker review.
The first would
At the
be
first
a meeting.
presentation, just a meeting.
Informational, right?
for you,
Yes.
right. And it would be separate and apart from your regular meeting schedule.
Okay,
Right.
that's what I was trying to.
Yes, yes, yes.
To return
right.
any of the old binders, just to save you.
And it's still a public meeting though, correct?
Yes, it'll be
Yes.
posted as a public meeting, right.
And as part of the public meeting, will we take questions from the,
No,
I would not.
it would
Okay.
just be a presentation,
Okay.
and then we would
okay.
give it to you.
What's the time frame, do we think, for this?
I think the early vote date is in
She wants to
February.
at the meeting
Oh,
with
the meeting?
Hogan's committee.
Well, the
The
presentation.
joint meeting?
Committee meeting.
According to this timeline, the edits will be finalized by 12/23, which is entirely possible because it had already been edited, so we just need to fine tune it. And then we have to do an internal review of the law on the map, so we're looking at around 1/9, probably around that first real week of January. All right.
Just to point out,
We
January
will-
9th is your
Is
first
our meeting.
regularly scheduled.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
Oh, it
So-
looks like we have 1/16 on the schedule for the informal meeting and presentation.
You said 116.
January 16th,
Oh,
Yep,
So when, after that meeting,
yes.
then we would have a public hearing.
Yes, it would come back to you, you would authorize a public, I think you would authorize a public hearing, and then you would hold the public hearing and vote.
right.
If, and you, I'm sorry, Sarah, you said you thought the council would or would not hold a public hearing?
Would.
Would, okay.
So, the last time we did this, didn't we do it separately because we thought it was gonna be a lot of people talking? The public was gonna be, or was that something else?
You mean separate from your regular meeting?
Right.
my guess is I wasn't here then, but my guess is, yeah, you did exactly that for that very reason, and there were probably a ton of people that showed up, and I would venture to guess that same thing will happen again.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And our action is not an approval, it's a recommendation to
Correct.
the council for
Their
approval or whatever.
Yes,
Based on what is conveyed to us.
correct.
Okay.
And we would, from my office, we would encourage you, after that meeting on the 16th, to authorize the public hearing as quickly as you are able at your very next meeting, so that this can move along, because we're trying to bring it over the finish line.
So try and get it on the 30th.
That's what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Thank you.
But our meeting's not the 16th, our meeting is the 9th.
Right, but you're
Right.
gonna have the informal meeting with the common the
Right,
committee
right.
at the council.
On the 16th.
There would be a committee meeting on the 16th.
Well,
with
probably not, because that's
you and the
actually
common
MLK
council.
Day, so.
Yeah, it's a holiday.
The 16th is MLK Day, so sometime that week, you're saying we would probably have this meeting. And then our next meeting is the 30th. So there's the possibility,
So if we're gonna put it on the agenda for the 30th, we need to act on it on the 9th, correct?
No, on the 30th, you would authorize your public hearing.
Oh,
okay.
all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you,
And the-
misunderstood.
And then we can orchestrate, you don't have to pick the day, that day, but then we can orchestrate with you what day would
Okay,
work to
okay.
hold that public hearing.
Sounds good, all right,
Yeah.
I misunderstood
Nope,
what
that's
you were
Well,
and
saying.
in February, we only have one meeting, so hopefully that would be easy for us to pick a day to do that special meeting for
Yes.
that.
Yes.
That would be wonderful.
Right.
Okay. All right.
So that doesn't require any action, that was
No, but it's an
informational.
FYI.
Right,
Yep.
okay. We got it. We do need to authorize the 3 new hearings for our next meeting and also the one that's being held open on the sign. So is there a motion for that?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Those authorizations are approved. And unless there's anything else, Jeff, we're ready to adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
Awesome.
Buster? Oh, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Our last meeting of the year.
Yes. Hey.
Merry Christmas, happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays.